Let me tell you about the fall of the House of Usher. So the fall of the House of Usher is from 2023, it was last year, and it's about siblings Roderick and Madeline Usher have built a pharmaceutical company into an empire of wealth, privilege, and power. However, secrets come to light when the heirs to the Usher dynasty start dying. And it's created by Mike Flanagan. So the fall of the House of Usher is a gory, vicious story. I would say this is the most gory, gruesome of all the series. He was putting in blood. He was holding back some punches. He always has, blood and things. But this one was really delivering on the horror. So if you don't like gore, I get it. If the other ones are more cerebral for you, I could see how someone might not like this one. Because it is gory and it is a true Shakespearean tragedy. But it does see the end of a villainous family line, the Ushers. So it's told as a story akin to a deathbed confession, much like the Poe story that inspired it. Which is The Fall of the House of Usher, by Roderick Usher, who is aged now, as is his once grand mansion, now cloaked in shadows and secrets. And in his story, he shares the chaotic, aggressive downfall of his family and what led to their demise. And through the series, we meet the many Ushers and those who serve them, operating as satellites revolving around the magnetic hold of the affluent Ushers. Each of Roderick's children, now grown and established Nepo babies, meet an untimely, gruesome end. And you're like, why? Honestly, I'm thinking, what does the media really say? How do you explain that? That's so crazy. And I think it would just really, dismantle a lot of things. It would just, shift things because people would be like, something is
how all these people die. But it's also, the inverse of that is how do all these people die at the hands of these companies and these people, and no one talks about them. So yeah.
And so for theirs to be so public is kind of a thing. It's like a horror story of Succession.
Yeah.
People love that show. Yeah. I just can't get with rich people doing awful things and not being brutally murdered. To me, I'm just I can't. I get it. Yeah. I get totally people are allowed to love it. It's just not for me. I'm just ew. Ew.
And also, for rich people don't get consequences in the real world, so we need media that gives consequences in this fake world.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just this is too much reality, and it feels gross.
Yeah, it's total catharsis for this.
And maybe the consequences aren't their entire family dying, but it should be jail or something else. You know what I mean?
They can't do this anymore.
Yeah, something that stops them.
Yeah, at the very least, stop.
Yeah.
So against the backdrop of a decaying mansion, the series weaves a complex tapestry of psychological intrigue, gothic horror, and supernatural suspense. And as Roderick delves deeper into the secrets of his family's past, he uncovers a series of shocking revelations that threaten to consume him entirely. But as the House of Usher teeters on the brink of collapse, Roderick must confront the demons that haunt him and uncover the truth before it's too late. It's too late. And with its haunting atmosphere, richly drawn characters, and spine-tingling plot twists, Flanagan offers us another nail-biting series that explores the impact of insatiable greed by those in power on the world around them. And it offers us a gruesome justice, a bloody knife of consequence that the villains of the real world will never face, and it's cathartic and emotional, and it left me badly wishing that Verna was real. In the end, I was like, oh, how do we manifest this being here? I felt honestly, I felt a little sad. I was like, why don't we have her?
Well, the question is, do we though? Because honestly, Roger didn't get consequences till he was old as heck. Yeah. And his kids had the consequences, but they were kids at one point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they participated, but they were not the start. And it's he got to live a long life filled with gross, but in his mind, he was happy for part of it.
Yeah, he was doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just I guess, some Verners are real. There was there was a Verna in France. So off with their hands. So they do exist out there. It's just we haven't seen them in a long time. Well, here on our soil, we see it all over the place. But tear up the planks. It is the beating of his hideous heart. I'm going to quote a little bit of Poe throughout my section because it's good. But like I said, Flanagan is back at it again with his fanboy fun, this time unpacking the legacy of Edgar Allan Poe. And I enjoyed the references to Poe's work in the show, though knowing the work, like the pieces that it was referencing, whether name of the character or name of the episode, definitely spoiled the fate of whatever Usher it was. Like I'd see the title, like, oh, okay, I know what's gonna happen. Yeah. Like, is there a monkey involved? All right, I know where this is going. And it's what had me truly hooked. I would get very giddy to see who's the next one and to hear the names and just like also like in looking up, like it forced me to look up things because I was like, what? I know I'm missing more. And so there's just some even just throwaway lines where I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. And then I want to read that now. So yeah, makes readers of us all. But that's not all that the show has to offer. In true Flanagan fashion, he offers us a strong critique of the pharmaceutical industry and the rich elite that murders many for wealth. And that is a heavy topic and one that I feel he handled well in all its weight. It's still like a horror show and it's very entertaining. But again, he's got those lines. They deliver and like a punch to the gut, leaving us gasping for breath and begging for justice that will never come, or maybe it can. But before I dive into those sad, beautiful, and honestly terrifying moments, I did want to geek out a little bit and share some of the Poe references found in the show, because the show overall does an amazing job of representing the work of Poe, who often criticized the wealthy upper-class villains of society. Like a lot of these stories that he's referencing, like you're like, okay, he's not far off. Like, he didn't have to work hard, is what I'm trying to say. He didn't really have to work hard to make this story exist. If Poe's works are to be believed that they exist in the same worlds, right? Like if he has his own Poe verse, this is what it would kind of look like. I could see it tying back even just to the Ushers in this way. But he also spoke of grief, loss, and the fragility of the human minds, just how any little thing can kind of shake you to your core and disrupt just like your processing of like the world around you. And again, Flanagan truly understands his source material, and the show felt true to the gothic, gory, and heartbreaking tone that Poe delivered in all of his works. So let's dive into those references, and then I'm going to close out with some impactful quotes, and then Kat's going to close out with a lot of sad.
So just I'm sorry, my section's sad.
And just like a full, like the show is sad. Like it has some fun to it because of the gore and because you're like questioning and you're like, what's going on? But you do get really emotionally attached to these characters, even when like some of them are truly villains. Some of them are just like, life happened. This is the circumstances that they're in. They didn't stand a chance. But like, it does get really sad because that's what he does. He knows how to like wallow and make you feel real world issues. Usually they're a little bit more intimate, where this is a like a grander scale of like grief and loss that he is targeting in essentially attacking the upper class and the 1%. So before we get into the sad of what it is and why we're upset about the world, let's geek out about literature, horror literature. So firstly, the show is named for a short story by Poe by the same name, which follows an unnamed narrator who is called upon by a childhood friend, the affluent Roderick Usher, and his ailing sister Madeline. And in the story, Roderick is sharing his life and how he arrived here in a dilapidated version of his life, now full of regret. And in the show, Roderick spins a similar tale, though far more gruesome, and this time to an old acquaintance turned enemy. See Augustine Dupin. And Dupin is a character in Poe's stories that actually predates Sherlock Holmes, but feature the same fashion of skills where he relied on inductive reasoning to solve the crimes presented to him. So he did it before Sherlock did, which is like, everyone knows Sherlock. Everyone knows, like, he looks at the world and he infers the whole situation from that. That's what Dupin was doing. And he comes up again in the story as a reference in one of the stories that occurs. But that, like, I didn't know that. And so I actually looked that up and was like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So each of the ushers is named for a character in Poe's work, including even Roderick's first wife, poor Annabel Lee, which is Poe's wife and cousin, who died. His young cousin. He shouldn't have been marrying. Different times. I don't know. In their names or the title of their episode, you can infer the fates of the ushers. So first we have Prospero, who goes by Perry. He's the youngest of the ushers, who fancies himself like this club creator. He envisions this like experience for his attendees, and it was drugs and sex and all the other devious activities that people like to do at night. I think, like, it sounds like a good idea. I feel like people would have loved that club. It's just like their processes and procedures, and he's too young to like understand the importance of safety.
Of those processes and procedures, yeah.
And also, like, he doesn't care. He's gonna get money. He's spoiled. He's a rich little baby. So the episode that sees his demise is The Mask of the Red Death, the same story his name comes from, which is about Prince Prospero and the rich who are partying it up during a literal plague before the Mask of Red Death joins the party and quickly kills them by way of the plague in the since they're isolated. Which feels a little eerily similar to when we just were in the middle of our own plague. And the rich were partying it up.
Yeah.
They be doing that. Episode 3, Murder in the Rue Morgue, finds Camille dead at the hands of a monkey. And this story is much the same, focused around Detective Dupin, like Murder in the Rue Morgue is, where he solves the mystery of a locked room and 2 viciously murdered women. Spoilers, a chimpanzee did it. And that's what he figures out.
Yeah.
His deductive reasoning. It's actually a really wild story. I highly recommend you giving it a read. I also learned some really scary things about chimpanzees just in life. Like, they're really scary. They're like sinister. I don't know. But
very capable of murder, yeah. Wasn't that in the other movie? Wasn't that in Nope?
Was he a chimpanzee?
I thought so.
Maybe, yeah. They just like do it for fun. Like, they like to do experiments.
Isn't that just like people?
Yeah, exactly. Scary. Which is like, yeah. But that's what, so if you know what happens in the Rue Morgue, you know what happens to poor Camille. And if you're watching, that's what happened to me. The Black Cat features Raoul Coley, who is Leo, Napoleon, Usher, who is driven mad by the appearance of his partner's cat, leading to his death. A similar thing happens in the story, and I feel like most people have read this one. It's similar. He's got a thread of, like, he loves putting stuff in stuff. So it features one of Poe's favorite tortures of someone or something in the walls or the floorboards. Like, people or things are just in stuff. Like, it's like Black Cat, Telltale Heart. There's like the Cask of Amontillado, all of them. He's like, what if something was in the walls? Like, Poe, go to sleep. Put the drugs down and go to sleep, sir. But it's. No. He didn't, and that's how he died. Really sad. But the Black Cat, it's pretty much that. It honestly, I think the story with in this show is way more captivating to me. But it's similar. It's like in the Black Cat, he's like an animal abuser. He's awful. Takes a cat's eye out. It's gross.
And in this, that's not. He was literally.
He wasn't trying to do that.
Yeah.
He was just driven mad. Which I was like, okay, I feel more strongly about this person than that jerk. Which is the same for like The Telltale Heart, which is arguably the most well-known of Poe's work. So I'm sure you knew what was coming in this episode. But it is also one of the most heartbreaking episodes. And again, Tania Miller just plays tragedy so well. Yeah. She walks on screen and I'm immediately like, I'm sold, whatever it is. Team her. And she was bad. She did awful things. And girl, why you do this to me? This time, she is Victorine, who is a scientist who murders her love in a fit of insanity. And her episode mirrors both Telltale Heart and the story of her namesake, which is called The Premature Burial, which I haven't read, but I did find a helpful article on Screwy Rant titled The Real Meaning Behind Every Usher Child's Name to explain in the Poe story, The Premature Burial, Victorine is accidentally buried alive by her lover, causing the narrator to also fear being buried alive. So it's like this. We're killing each other. Goldbug is about a man who becomes enthralled by a gold bug. It kind of reads like oh my god, I'm totally blanking on it. It's like right there. Heart of Darkness. Joseph Conrad. Okay. And some Lovecraft, where it's like people going places they shouldn't be going, touching things they shouldn't be touching.
Yeah.
Just a trend of white men in literature and life. So that's kind of what that story is. And Tamberlane uses Goldbug as like the icon for her company. And her name is from a poem called Tamerlane about a ruler who sacrifices love for power, which we see Tamerlane do without hesitation to poor Bilt. He's also a reference to a story, but I didn't read it. I was like, oh, gotta go to the important people. But also I didn't realize, because he looks so different. The guy who played her husband is also in Midnight Mass. He's the guy with like the beard. I'll send you pictures. I forget his name right now.
Oh wait, okay, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
I was like, too, what? He looks so different.
That's the effect of beards, ultimately.
And the effect of Flanagan. Like, he transforms characters, all like people into new characters. I will say the guy who plays Frederick Usher, he always be somebody's dad. He'd just be playing dad. So Frederick Usher, who was the oldest and quite despicable child of Roderick, is named for Poe's first printed story called Metzengerstein. I don't speak German. Metzengerstein, a tale in an imitation of the German, which I also haven't read. But here's what Screen Rant had to say. In Metzengerstein, Frederick exhibits cruel behavior due to his immense power at a young age, and in the end, he dies in a fire after entering a burning castle, which is pretty similar to how Frederick dies in The Fall of the House of Usher, the show, in the demolition of a building. However, Frederick's name is also inspired by Poe's story, The Pit and the Pendulum, of which the episode is named, and also has a similar fate. Lastly, Lenore, the granddaughter of Roderick, who is so much unlike the rest of her family, with some humanity and care still in her, like not having been robbed of those features yet. She too meets a tragic end that leaves viewers much more heartbroken than the others, who seemed at least a little bit deserving, if not more. So Lenore is named for the lost love whose death plagues the narrator in The Raven, which that's her episode. So that like The Raven is just about how grief is there. It's just always hovering around you, and it isolates you from the world around you too. And it's a thief, and it's tragic, and it's sad, and all of those other emotions that come with it. And so Lenore in that is this, love gone too soon and, robbed of us. And that's precisely what she is in this. So perfectly named. Just a few other nods that I found interesting include, this time, thank you to Entertainment has an article called Explaining the Edgar Allan Poe References in The Fall of the House of Usher. There's a lot out there. You can find something. They say Igby Rigney, the Midnight Club, he's from the Midnight Club, plays Toby, one of Camille's two assistants, and in a particular scene in episode 2, his boss exclaims, "Toby, damn it!" upon learning he hasn't discovered who the supposed in the family is. And this is a reference to the lead character of 1841's Never Bet the Devil Your Head, which centers on Toby Dammit, a man who loses his head after seemingly making a bet with the devil. But a bit on the nose there, Poe, but a bit on the nose for the show. Making deals with devils, people be doing that. We can't all beat them in a fiddle competition. So Mark Hamill's author Pym, whose name and fantastical story hints at the true identity of Verna as being this ominous, unspeakable evil or like otherworldly being. In the narrative of Arthur Gurdon Pym of Nantucket, Arthur Pym sails the sea on a whaling vessel, abruptly ending at the South Pole. And then journey includes horrible things like cannibalism and otherworldly monsters, including Verna, who tells him that she waved to him from the shoreline when he found himself on the spooky lands of the unknown. And then Arthur Pym also makes like a joke about eating someone.
And Roderick also is like, I wonder what he did down there. Like, we could have eaten somebody. I always imagine it was something like kind of like crazy, like eating somebody or something like that.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it was. Yeah, they alluded like that journey changed him irreparably, and it's why he has like Verna's like, I tempted you once before, you said no, and I'll tempt you again. And he's like, no thanks. And she's like, cool. That's all I can do. I could ask. And then one of the most recognizable references would be when Roderick and Madeline brick up their boss in the walls, which is a clear reference to the Cask of Amontillado. He's even dressed as a clown, which is what happens in the story, because it was like a Halloween costume. It was like a costume party of some sort, but he's dressed as a clown. Or jester. And that's in the Cask of Amontillado. He's in a jester costume. When he what I forget his name. It's a fun one. But you definitely read that in high school, I'm sure. So that's not all the references that there are in the show, but it's all the ones I have time for today. So go read some classic horror. And then you could rewatch the show and be like, whoa, what? That's fun.
I'll have to do that because I haven't read any of them really, other than like the Telltale Heart. I remember they also did like Simpsons references to some of Poe's work, and I remember watching those. So that's about all I needed, I guess. I don't know. But you're right, I should go back and read them so I can watch the show and actually like appreciate the references. I remember the Black Cat too. I also remember that one
because it's it's like the same thing. Like he's like, put them in the walls. Because the cat's in the walls, the person's under the floorboards, the guy's bricked up in the tunnels. Like, we just putting people in the walls and in the house. I get it. Like, your decisions haunt you, Poe. I get it.
Yeah. Consequences hide in the walls of your home.
In plain sight, you know? You're driven mad by your actions, if only. But Death has reared himself a throne. So, while watching, Kat actually mentioned, they said to me, do all rich people sell their souls to the devil? And in my opinion, they do. Their souls being their capacity for human decency, compassion, and emotional intelligence. And that exchange, they're giving that capacity up for the wealth that they get in return. And it's not a devil, so we don't get the comeuppance that we are owed for the people who are making those exchanges. But
there are no ethical billionaires.
Yes, as we've discussed many times on the show, how it is impossible to be both a billionaire and a good person. Obviously, there's the villainous choices that you make to obtain that wealth, which is corrupting. Like, you have to do horrible things to obtain that much wealth. You cannot do it in any way that is a good person, right? But we've also discussed in length how having excess wealth alters your brain chemistry. Like, it literally changes the way that you see the world and understand other people, and your capacity for empathy and like yeah, just that honestly at the core. And so I do highly recommend checking out our American Psycho episode for more on that. Kat did a really
fundamentally changes the brain.
Yeah, it's such a great episode on that. Like I learned a lot, and something that's really helped me even just understand some of the tragedies of the world, and kind of back that up when I'm trying to explain to people like these are literal evil villains. Like I don't know how else to explain. Like they're villains. Yep. Period. So while Verna is not real and unable to exact revenge upon the ruling class, that's our job. Verna is real in a more tragic sense, right? That these people, very few people, mind you, we outnumber them, have made a rather one-sided deal, the consequences of which most likely they won't suffer in their lifetimes, but instead will ripple out, affecting the rest of the world in irreparable ways. So Verna's not here. So we have to be Verna. So Verna, in an impactful and harrowing scene, asks Roderick to look out the window as bodies rain from the sky and begin piling up. And he's in a skyscraper. Okay? Like he is at the top. He's rich. He's at the top and they're just falling. And it's like the thump and the like. It's so jarring. I was not expecting it. And it's like such an obvious metaphor for the pharmaceutical industry and its effects, because the whole story is that Roderick and Madeline are a pharmaceutical company that they've created, Ligadone, that has hurt people in much the same way that they have done in our world. So this is just like to see it in one place when it's something like an issue that is often like minimized or ignored or vilified. It's so easy to be like, oh, they're addicts, so they don't matter, without like looking at the cause and saying like, how did that happen? How did they get to this place? And most often, you know, a lot of like the newer people who are struggling in like the most like decades of time have been, you know, they've had some type of accident and, you know, needed medication to aid them while they're healing. And it's addictive. And then when the doctors cut them off, now they have to go and find that somewhere else. And so then it leaves...
The doctors are the actual drug dealers.
Yes,
which
or they just keep doing it.
Yeah. And the vilifying of addicted people is actually something that the insurance companies paid for. We feel that way, not because that's what we should feel, but because they spent a lot of money to make ads and campaigns to influence the public to think that. Just like they did for welfare.
Yeah. So. Well, like I'd say if anyone hasn't watched Thank You for Smoking, I think that's such a great example of the way that is twisted and how easy you can like manipulate public opinion for the greater interest of these wealthy elites.
Or at least it was before the internet as much. Which is why they're so mad at it.
That's why they're trying to shut down TikTok. Anyway, so that's why we exist. We are not mass media. We do not have anybody giving us money, unfortunately. We need money too, but it does mean we have the freedom to say whatever we want, which is
ideally we would be people funded instead of corporation funded. If we ever do receive funding for anything.
Yeah, that being said, if you support the Ghouls, check out our Coffee account. Support us. Help us out. Help us keep making content like this. So that really impactful. Like it like shook me. I really wasn't expecting all the bodies. And it like... Because it's like, you can say that, right? You can say like, you've murdered all these people by denying people access to an easily obtainable, cheap medication that could save their lives, by denying, like nobody should die because they can't afford medication. And the fact that people are doing that and people are being addicted and being lost too soon, because they're like led like lambs to the slaughter to this addiction. Right. But to see it in this way, like it is so obvious, right? It's such an obvious metaphor. She's like, here's the dead, like here's the piles, the massive, just like, they're just piling up. But even still, with it being so obvious, I think we don't really get that all the time in media. People just aren't calling it for what it is all the time, and even as overtly as that. And so I really appreciated that. And even further, she says, these are your bodies, right? And she says, though she's worked with so many villains, so many rich people, just like Roderick, but real ones, that have, been integral to where we are, like putting us where we are now, and to ending the lives that they have. Roderick has made a profound impact. And she says, I've worked with a lot of truly influential people over the years, but when it comes to sheer body count, you're in my top 5. And this impact, Roderick is terribly aware of. He admits to Dupin in his confession that he was aware of the pyramid of bodies he'd be building on top of to reach that level of power. Like, that's what he says, pyramid of bodies. Because that's what we're saying. When we're saying you can't be, there's no ethical billionaires, there's no good person that could be a billionaire, because you do have to build on a pyramid of bodies, whether they're alive or dead. Right? Like, you are profiting off of the suffering of other people. Because you have to. It's the only way you can get. And you have to turn off that part of your brain and soul that cares to be able to do that.
Yeah.
You just can't be both. So some other moments that stuck with me and felt like the thesis of the film include a monologue from Verna where she says, so much money. One of my favorite things about human beings, starvation, poverty, disease, you can fix all that just with money. And you don't. I mean, if you took just a little bit of time off the vanity voyages, pleasure cruising, billionaire space race, hell, you stopped making movies and TV for 1 year, and you spent that money on what you really need, you could solve it all with some to spare, which is a really big ouch and completely true. Because homelessness, starvation, poverty, disease, those things that she mentions are not unavoidable. They aren't impossible issues to address. We have the resources, technology, and ability to alleviate and solve each of these issues, not only in our own country, but worldwide. The only thing stopping us are those in power who are hoarding the wealth like a monstrous dragon upon a horde, suffocating everyone else around them. Like, we have, like, there's, we have it. We can. I just watched this whole thing about how the Supreme Court tomorrow, which we're filming this on a Sunday, tomorrow, Monday, is having this whole discussion about essentially criminalizing homelessness and like putting unhoused people in prison for unpaid labor because they can't have a place to stay.
Yeah. Instead, and I believe there are already places that have passed it.
Yeah. Instead of using the whole, like, the multitudes of vacant properties and skyrises that we can't even afford, we could use those to house our community and the people who live here. Like, what? But no, they're the problem. Got to put them away. Don't want anyone seeing them. So
it's because they love slavery so much. And they're still so mad about it. We
got to keep finding ways to put it
Make
back.
Slavery. Yeah.
Do it again, but different. Put a different mask on it. Which again, like, it's moments like these that bring us back to that appreciation for Flanagan, where he does, like, he'll have such like a very honest horror story, and then he'll hit you with just like, he's like, let me rant for a second. He's like, all right, pause on the gore for just a second. Let me tell you about this. Okay. Have you ever thought about this? And then you're like, yeah, I have, Flanagan. And I'm so glad that you're making other people think about it too. And I just really do I do feel like he's giving us pieces of himself in the things that he spirals out about. So there's also a monologue. I'm almost done. 2 monologues.
You're good.
But there's a monologue at the end of the show by Madeline as she fights against her fate, an analysis of her character that I think it's misrepresented. I think it's easy for people to be like, she's right. Like, sometimes people don't realize that it's like villains are allowed to be bad, and that the things that they say are bad. Like, you're supposed to interpret them as bad. It's not like it's like characters could be bad in fiction. Like, that's how they grow. Or anyway, she says. So explicit content here. She says, we turn men into cum fountains and women into factories, cranking out what? An impoverished workforce there for the labor and to spend what little they make consuming. And what do we teach them to want? Houses they can't afford, cars that poison the air, single-serve plastics, clothes made by starving children in third world countries, and they want it so bad that they're begging for it. They're screaming for it. They're insisting upon it. And where the problem? These fucking monsters, these fucking consumers, these fucking mouths. They point at you and make like we're the problem. They fucking invented us. They begged us, and they're begging for us still. She's such a cunt. I can't. She's like so evil. Like, Roderick is definitely sinister, and the fact that he makes this deal when he has 2 children that are alive, crazy. She does not give a shit about people.
Yeah.
And she never tries to. So to the end, like, at least he's remorseful. She's never that. So on the surface, this can be interpreted as a critique on rampant consumerism and this fast consumerism that we subscribe to as a culture, demanding more and faster. But remember that Madeline is the villain here. So she is the rich 1% that has created the very system she's blaming people for falling victim to. This is her way of justifying her deeds and to excuse her behavior, but it in no way accomplishes that because of wealth inequality, and inequality that Madeline has contributed to and created a chasm for, has conditioned us to seek joy in products that offer short moments of bliss, because that's all we're afforded when so much of our time is dedicated to working to survive. We get a few minutes. Okay, I want to buy a big screen TV because I can't go anywhere. So I'm going to escape through this screen. Like, regular people are forced to live in the now, unable to plan or work towards a future, right? There's a whole conversations about like the inability to build up a savings account or even to have a Costco membership, right? Or to think about buying things in bulk. They can't. So they end up spending more on less because that's what they can afford now. And it ends up costing more over time. They can't even be strategic about that because we got paycheck to paycheck, right? So yes, we want more. We want it fast and cheap because of all the currencies that we are lacking. The most crucial is time. Right? We are exhausted from laboring with the hoard of wealth that we can never reach on our shoulders and the hours of our lives slipping through our hands. We are deserving of those little joys, but we're also deserving of the time and opportunity to invest in ourselves and to eventually aspire for more efficient, safe, and healthy choices. Hell, to have a choice at all. Because that's it. That's a big thing about what she is saying, is there's an illusion of choice. Right? She's saying they're asking us for this instead of saying this is all we've given them. Yeah. This is all they can have. So we want
there's
more.
There's literally no other choice.
We want more because what else do we have? Like, it's insane to me. Like, so many people are like, oh, we're all like, there's no, you can't exist in capitalism and, be a good person, all this other stuff. It's like, this is where we live.
Yeah. Right? And like, literally, there's like also like studies done about like the human mind and like how when you're not given the possibility, like the idea that there's a possibility of something else and you don't have the time to imagine, you literally have not the resources or time to even sit and think or process for a second. You can't even imagine something else because you're so busy just trying to survive. So
yeah, and when you even think about like what options there are, like if we're voting against like fast fashion, obviously, which is very harmful for the environment and for the people who are being abused to get that, right? The alternative are clothing that we can afford. And the reason we can't afford it is because of the employment, because we haven't raised minimum wage and because people have like 3 jobs just to pay the bills. So it's like, you're giving the illusion of choice and that you're putting the onus on the population to be like, well, you're choosing McDonald's when you could have bought fresh vegetables. And it's like, where? Where are the fresh vegetables? We live in a food desert, right? Like, yeah. And it's just toxic. It composites all over itself.
Or the vegetables are covered in chemicals, which isn't actually
yeah, illusion of choice. It all, no matter what you do, you're fucked. So lastly, we go over to Kat, just because Kat's going to talk a lot about like the pharmaceutical industry, and I just really wanted to rant on the rich too, because that's such a big, and also 100%. Just like the other industries that are contributing to this wealth inequality that is being talked about in this show. So lastly, I'll discuss Roderick's famous lemon speech. It's very long, so bear with me, in which he shares, "When life hands you lemons, make lemonade? No. First, you roll out a multimedia campaign to convince people lemons are incredibly scarce, which only works if you stockpile lemons and control the supply. Then a media blitz. Lemon is the only way to say I love you. The must-have accessory for engagements or anniversaries. Roses are out, lemons are in. Limited edition lemon bracelets, yellow diamonds called lemon drops. You get Apple to call their new operating system OS Lemon, a little accent over the O. You charge 40% more for organic lemons, 50% more for conflict-free lemons. You pack the Capitol with lemon lobbyists. You get a Kardashian to suck a lemon wedge in a leaked sex tape. Timothy Chalamet wears lemon shoes at Cannes. Get a hashtag campaign. Something isn't cool or tight or awesome. No, it's lemon. Did you see that movie? Did you see that concert? It was effing lemon. Billie Eilish, OMG, hashtag lemon. You get Dr. Oz to recommend 4 lemons a day and a lemon suppository supplement to get rid of toxins, because there's nothing scarier than toxins. Then you patent the seeds. You write a line of genetic code that makes the lemons look just a little more like tits. And you get a gene patent for the tit lemon DNA sequence. You cross-pollinate. You get those seeds circulating in the wild. And then you sue the farmer for copyright infringement when the genetic code shows up on their land. Sit back, rake in the millions, and then when you're done and you've sold them your lempire for a few $1 billion, then and only then you make some fucking lemonade. It's a heavy one. Yeah. And I think it's pretty obvious what's being communicated here. But given the current situation, specifically what I was thinking of, especially when they said conflict-free lemons, is the Democratic Republic of Congo, where conflict minerals like tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold, all necessary minerals in the creation of our beloved technology, are being mined, and in really harmful ways, and chaotic and just like entire nation destabilizing ways. And so in an article on CNBC titled "How Conflict Minerals Make It Into Our Phones," they explain the need for these minerals and why we should be concerned about the origin of our devices' materials, saying, "The materials are integral to consumer electronics. In a smartphone, for example, tin is used to solder metal components together, while tantalum is used in capacitors, which store electrical energy. Tungsten is used in the components that make a phone vibrate, and gold is used in circuit board connectors. In the past decade, African countries, intergovernmental organizations, and companies have ramped up their efforts to clean up mineral supply chains, but consumers still can't be sure if the minerals in their electronics are fully conflict-free, or if the mines where they originated are dangerous, environmentally destructive, or use child labor." We don't know, right? Yeah. Because we're sold the finished package, which is your iPhone, not how we got here and the impact that it has on these people that are so far away, right? Yeah. This is only one example of the very many that plague our world like a mask of red death, looming on the outside as a warning while we party away on the inside, isolated from the consequences of even our own actions as consumers, right? Yeah. Which is why it is our duty to speak out against these atrocities, to be aware of our needs impact on the world, and most importantly, to hold the people responsible, right? We can't hold our breath for the appearance of a vengeful Verna to exact the terms of their villainous deals with the devil. injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? So we need to fight for our Congolese brothers and sisters, for our Palestine brothers and sisters, and our neighbors around us, housed and unhoused. What you should take away from this show is that we do have the power. We just need to remember that we are the many and that we have a voice. Be the Verna that you want to see in the world. And I'm not advocating murder. I'm just saying direct action gets the goods. So, like, there are things you can do in lieu of murder to get things done, right? I'm just saying, like, be as angry and as vengeful as Verna minus murdering people and for some horrible ways.
Yeah, and so there's so much to say about, like, the psychology of people when they're handed power. Mm-hmm. And even, like, in looking at the Usher kids too, you see, like, kids who, like, didn't know they were part of the Ushers till they were, like, in their 20s, some of them, and then they were just thrown all this money, and it corrupted them. So it's like, when we're dismantling these systems, there has to be protections from one person being like, you know what, they got to do it. So, you know, we were oppressed before. Why don't I do that now? Mm-hmm. And it's like, thinking about what's happening in the world right now, because that's their whole argument and is not real. The whole thing.
Yeah, it's my turn. We don't want it to be anybody's turn. Like, we're done with the turns. The turns are done. That's it. Like, I don't want us to hold them responsible and then put somebody else there. Like, no one has the right to do genocide. I want that to be clear, just because genocide happened to you. Like, that's not how that works. So
yes, ultimately,
my 2 cents.
Same 2 cents. We're sharing them. That's all we have.